All right, everybody. This is a production readiness sub-project meeting for October 30th. Just a couple of us here. We wanted to do a retro on last cycle. There were a few specific issues. Let me pull up the agenda. Every time I pull up the agenda, it pulls up from like 3 years ago. Okay. Let me share this. Okay, so now having said this, I haven't thought about this in a couple of weeks. So do I even remember what the things were? We had a couple of interesting discussions on Slack. Let me see. I can probably go find those. But if anybody has a point they want to make on the retro, just raise it. I'm gonna go find the things from Slack.
There hasn't been that many. The one I literally started thinking about it, and the one that I remember was about the from a thread that we had. So when you will be going through the Slack, you should quickly find it. There was
Yeah, the one with
basically a thread
118
about
replies.
there was the scheduler functionality, and partially it's enabled, partially disabled, and how it will impact. There has been like huge thread, and I'm still trying to figure out what was the root cause. But basically, there were different behaviors of the scheduler, and it was tricky to roll back because if the field was already set when the feature was on, then if you rolled back to the previous version of Cube, you would get a different behavior versus when you would only disable the functionality.
Are you there's okay? So this is the one I'm thinking of is about the feature gate we split out. We have a feature gate field. And the only reason I think it might be the same thing or might not is
Yeah,
it's because
it
it is
is.
about scheduling for the admin. I think it was for the admin accessing the
Yes.
admin. Yeah,
Yeah. That's the one. There was like, it's a thread from October 7th. I can link the thread
I have the thread here. Yeah.
in the chat. That's the thread from Slack. So basically, yes, that was the new field which changed the scheduling behavior. And then if you disable the future gate and the field was already set, how we should react to it, because on a rollback,
Right. It was
you would
whether
get,
we. Sorry to interrupt. I think it was whether we enforce the feature gate behavior, um, like only at admission, or then we. So whether we just do it in the API server or whether we have to implement it in the edge, the clients. So like, do you only do it at admission where basically you don't allow this field to be set or you allow it to be set based on the feature gate? Do you do it in the API server where you blank out the field because the feature gate's not set? Or do you leave it in the output whether or not the feature gate's set? And then what do the clients do in that case? So do they continue to behave as if the feature were there because somebody created a resource previously while the feature was enabled? Yes, there's an extensive discussion there. Did we end up with a conclusion, a definitive conclusion? I seem to recall we did.
The
Or
standard flow is that the QAPI server will continue to return the field because we don't know the meaning of the field. We don't know how important the field is. We don't know whether the object is valid without the field. So the API server continues to return the field.
Okay.
Any modifications to that resource can remove that field, but it'll be preserved and allowed to remain until it is actively removed. Then the standard flow for every client program, so things like a Cube Controller Manager or Cube Scheduler, is to behave as though the field did not exist. And the reason that's the standard flow is because what if the problem that you're mitigating is actually in one of those client programs? And this definitely happens, right? We see it with kubelet gates, we see it with controller manager gates, we see it with scheduler gates. And so what's supposed to happen is the API server will return the field, and the controller manager or the scheduler will simply ignore it. And this is behavior that is identical to what if you ran skewed, right? What if you ran with a QAPI server that knew a field and you ran with n-1 cube controller manager? You'd get exactly the same behavior. For this particular one in the scheduler, I recall you feeling extremely strongly, John, that it was better to find a way to refuse to schedule a pod instead. And
yes,
that means that there is additional code, a flow that happens when that happens. So what if the backup flow is now broken? We know it's going to be likely tested. There's risk there. There is also risk in what the rest of the system does as a result of that, right? Yes. So we actually, in that exact area, we have actually had pretty bad behavior on daemon sets. This happened during the daemon set transition from the Cube Controller Manager to the Cube Scheduler. And when that happened, the two interacted very badly if they did not agree on what the behavior was supposed to be. And so, you were closer to it. You said, like, hey, it's very important we just don't schedule this pod.
Yeah.
I remember asking in that thread, okay, if that really is what we need to do, please test to be sure that specifically in this case, the daemon set controller does not experience bad behavior.
Yes. And Patrick tested that, and and we found that it was okay. And I think the conclusion in that thread was that the way the policy is written, it does leave some discretion to this particular instance in this particular decision tree endpoint. Did we decide we needed any updates? I seem to recall at one point saying, hey, we should update some guidance somewhere, but maybe that was before we fully came to conclusion on it.
I'm actually not sure how much of what I just described exists only in my head, Jordan's head, and Tim's head. I don't know.
Can you review some of it? Some of it is written down. There's a pretty good document that somebody linked in that thread about feature gates and how it should operate. It could probably use a little more refinement based on exactly what you said, like the ordinary flow, not blanking things and then having all the edges act as if the field's not there. Like, I think that's the fact that that's how skew would be makes sense, but I don't know that that's really explicitly stated in quite the way you just put it, and that might be helpful.
If you can link me to the doc, I will look to be sure that it is synchronized across. And yes, there is discretion, right? So it's not as though there's some permanent rule forever that says you can't do it. It's just think very, very carefully.
Yeah, there's the MD file, and that was one we were drilling in particular, but really you should look at the overall flow, not just that one header.
Okay. I will queue that up.
Just read it over again because it probably hasn't been touched in a year, or something or more.
A year or 5, yeah.
Exactly.
And this was the Patrick where he pointed to the Tim's doc where he summarized the issues with the future gates.
Now, hang on.
I also
There's only so many docs you guys can link me.
Yeah. I remember that at some point in time, we also agreed that we should be explicit about mentioning in either the rollback or in the risk section that ideally we should let the user clear the field before a rollback or before turning the feature off to make sure that the behavior is what would be closer to the
Yeah,
standard flow
I think
of
we
it is
documented.
disabled. Yeah.
Yes, I think we documented that these should be removed first. But then, of course, we don't count on people actually reading documentation, so we still have to do something safe. But I believe we did
Yes.
document that. I agree. Yeah, that makes sense. Were there any other big questions? Joe asked a question here. About in-place pod updates. Okay, this was actually similar, Macha, to what you just said. We basically said they need to document how to clear. This is about that there's internal state, and the CAP originally said, "Oh, create a new node." And it's like, well, what does that mean exactly in like physical like? So we requested that they document how to clear the state for kubelet there, like, and not be just like, well, you have to wipe your whole drive, right? Like that's a little bit extreme.
Yeah, I recall one. Yeah, I had something similar.
I think that got covered. I'm just going back through the chat here to see if there's anything else, since we've a month later lost all our context. Our context windows aren't that big in our brains. Let's see.
The only I did have one topic I was interested, but I wanted to hear it from the shadows, whether it is useful. Like, are they getting something out of it? Do they feel like they're progressing? Do they still have a desire to progress?
Yeah, I didn't get as much support from shadows this time as I have in previous cycles. I felt like the cycle went really well, actually, in general, but and the shadows that did do things helped me, but I think it requires more active management than we gave it this time. Like, I think in past cycles we've like been like, hey, come shadows, and we did some live reviews, or we required them to do it ahead of time. I think they aren't here to answer that question, David, obviously. Whether they get something out of it, I think that the project gets something out of having shadows, because we need a pipeline. And so not only is their actual contribution helpful, which it is, but if David decides that he's won the lottery and he wants to retire, then we go down to one less person on this team, and it's good to have a pipeline.
Yeah, understand. I'm not pitching that we make we cancel the program and stop. I'm looking at it more. Well, I look at who we have. Right, we have Han, and he meets criteria. If he wanted to, he could do it. I don't think he wants to. I don't know why. Might be useful to understand that. There are shadows who are in and out, right? So Mo was active this time. He wasn't as active last time. Sometimes stuff just happens release on release. Yeah. If it is like a desire, if I were looking at the list of names, I saw Mo very active across multiple PRs and across multiple of the reviewers. That could be a case where we go to Mo and say, like, why don't you try writing up what you have? You've been doing this now 3 releases, I think, although one was relatively inactive. Figure out where the gaps are, and let's see if we can close them in 133.
Yeah.
And so I think with some effort on our part, we could shepherd our shadows perhaps a little more actively.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. And I think it is a valid thing to ask them, what, like, are they learning things? Are they getting something out of it? And maybe we should take that as an action item. So. All right. Well, anything else, guys? Okay. So David gets all the action items. He's going to review those documents.
I had one topic with Matt, who was interested in helping with shadowing, but he was not a Cube Org member. So he could not be added to the board and so forth. That was a little bit tricky because actually his first contributions will be around PRR.
Yeah.
And that's how he's planning to earn his Kate's membership.
Right.
So I don't know if that will happen more frequently. So I'm not sure if that's something that we
So
want to address.
Han kind of recruited him out of our SRE org, and so he hadn't been doing anything in upstream Kubernetes, but he's like a great kind of person to do this job, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I guess I don't know that we should make a bunch of changes based on one example, but I'm wondering whether there's a whether eventually we'll need a mechanism in the tooling to allow access to that board. Like maybe even it might be even possible for the GitHub admins to.
I
to
wouldn't over-rotate on this, right? Like, did he make 2 or 3 contributions? Like, did he do a good job?
He did a good job, but he it was a barrier because like he can't like add notes to the board.
Sure,
Or
but like, so
can't-
he's done that now, right? And I saw it, and you saw it. So
yeah, so now we can just
let's
add
do it again. Let's just put him in the org, and he can do it.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. All right, folks. Thank you.
All right.
See you. Dave, are you guys going to be at KubeCon?
Yep.
Well, I definitely will. You and I are presenting together.
That's right.
You're
We
gonna
are.
be there,
Yeah.
right?
We probably have a look at
Better
that.
be there, John.
Oh God, you have no idea. Yeah, I got a little bit of prep work to do in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I've started some of the prep on my end. So.
Awesome. I'll see you guys in a couple weeks then.
All right, see ya.
See ya.